There is a pattern that connects every single financial catastrophe in modern history, every market crash, every business failure, every personal bankruptcy, every devastating investment that wiped out a family's entire savings. And when you look closely enough, when you strip away the complexity and the excuses and the external blame, you find the same root cause hidden at the center of every disaster. The decision was made too fast. I want you to think about the worst financial decision you have ever made in your life. Not the one that hurt the most on paper, but the one that deep down you already knew was wrong the moment you made it. How long did you think about it before you committed? A day, a few hours, a few minutes. In my experience, and I have now been studying human financial behavior for well over 7 decades, the greatest predictor of a catastrophic financial outcome is not bad luck, and it is not a lack of intelligence. It is speed. The faster a person makes a major financial commitment, the more likely they are to destroy a significant portion of their wealth. And the slower, the more deliberate, the more patient a person is before acting, the more likely they are to build something extraordinary. I have made thousands of investment decisions over the course of my life. Some of them were brilliant, some of them were mistakes. But I can tell you this with absolute certainty, every single mistake I ever made, without a single exception, was made in haste. There was always a voice in my head telling me to slow down. There was always a quiet, rational part of my mind whispering that I needed more time. But I did not always listen. And the times I did not listen, I paid for it. I paid for it with money. And I paid for it with the far more irreplaceable currency of time. In the next 25 minutes, I am going to share with you the most powerful decision-making system I have ever developed. I call it the 72-hour rule. It is not complicated. It does not require a Harvard degree or a Bloomberg terminal or a financial advisor with a corner office. It requires only one thing: patience, real, deliberate, almost uncomfortable patience. The kind of patience that the modern world has declared a weakness, but which I have found over and over again to be the single greatest source of financial strength available to any ordinary person. We live in an age that has declared war on patience. The entire architecture of the modern economy has been redesigned from the ground up to exploit the human instinct for speed. Your smartphone delivers anything you want in seconds. You can order dinner with one tap and have it at your door in 30 minutes. You can watch any film ever made instantly, in full high definition, without waiting a single second for it to buffer. You can send money to the other side of the planet in the time it takes you to blink. These are extraordinary conveniences. I do not deny that. But they have created a profoundly dangerous side effect in the human brain. They have rewired our neural pathways to associate speed with competence. They have trained us to believe that a fast decision is a confident decision, and that hesitation is a sign of weakness, of fear, of missing out. And nowhere is this psychological rewiring more financially dangerous than in the world of investing in major life decisions. I want to tell you about a moment early in my career, before Berkshire, before the billions, when I almost made a decision in 5 minutes that would have changed the entire trajectory of my life. I was a young man, and I had been approached by a very persuasive businessman who had an opportunity that he described as once in a generation. He sat across the desk from me with a confident smile and a stack of impressive-looking documents. And he told me that I had 24 hours to decide. After 24 hours, the opportunity would be gone forever, given to someone else who had the vision to see what I could not. I felt the pull of it immediately. I felt the urgency grip my chest, the way it grips every human being who has ever been presented with a manufactured deadline. I felt the fear of missing out before the term even existed, and I almost said yes. I almost signed the papers that afternoon. But something stopped me. Not wisdom, not experience, not a sophisticated financial model. What stopped me was a simple rule that an old mentor of mine had once shared over a quiet lunch. He told me, Warren, if someone ever tells you that you have to decide right now, the correct answer is always no. Always. Because no legitimate opportunity in the history of human commerce has ever genuinely expired in 24 hours. Artificial urgency is the oldest sales tactic in existence. The universe rewards the patient and punishes the impulsive. I stood up, I thanked the man for his time, and I walked out of that office. Within 6 months, the entire venture had collapsed into bankruptcy, taking with it the savings of every single person who had signed those papers that afternoon. That lesson cost me nothing except a moment of discomfort. For everyone else in that room, it cost them everything. This is the foundation of the 72-hour rule. This is where it begins, not in a textbook, not in a lecture hall, but in the lived, visceral understanding that speed is the enemy of wealth, and that every moment of manufactured urgency you encounter in your financial life is a design trap built specifically to bypass the most powerful tool you possess, your own rational, deliberate, patient mind. Over the next 25 minutes, I am going to walk you through the exact system I have used to make the most important decisions of my financial life. I am going to show you the 3 greatest enemies of good financial decisions, and I am going to give you a simple, practical 3-step framework that you can apply immediately to every major decision you will ever face. By the time we are finished, you will never again look at urgency the same way. You will see it not as an opportunity, but as a warning signal. A red flag, the surest sign that someone somewhere does not want you to think clearly. My partner Charlie Munger had a saying that I have carried with me for over 50 years. He would look at any complex problem, any difficult decision, any situation where the obvious answer seemed to be screaming at him to act. And he would say just 2 words, invert. Always invert. What Charlie meant by this was simple but profound. If you want to understand how to make great decisions, first study the anatomy of terrible ones. If you want to know how to build wealth, first understand in precise detail every mechanism by which ordinary people destroy it. And when Charlie and I sat together over the decades and analyzed the financial decisions that had ruined brilliant, educated, well-intentioned people, we found the same signature over and over and over again: speed, uninvestigated urgency, the willingness to commit before the mind had been given time to do its most important work. Over decades of quiet study, I developed what I now call the 72-hour rule. And I want to explain to you not just what the rule is, but why 72 hours specifically. Why not 24 hours? Why not a week? The answer lies in the neuroscience of human decision-making, which I stumbled upon long before the scientists had named it. When a human being is presented with a decision that triggers an emotional response, whether that emotion is excitement, fear, desire, or urgency, the brain enters what researchers now call the hot state. In the hot state, the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for long-term planning, risk assessment, and rational analysis, is essentially overridden by the limbic system. The limbic system is ancient. It was designed by millions of years of evolution to make fast decisions in life or death situations. If you are standing in a jungle and a predator jumps out at you, the limbic system is extraordinarily valuable. It will save your life before your conscious mind has even registered the threat. But the financial markets are not a jungle. And the limbic system, magnificent as it is completely unequipped to evaluate a stock prospectus or a real estate investment or a business partnership. It is a sports car being asked to perform surgery. The first sleep cycle, roughly 24 hours after the initial emotional trigger, begins to quiet the limbic system. The adrenaline fades. The manufactured urgency loses some of its grip, but it is rarely enough. The emotional memory of the initial excitement or the fear of missing out is still fresh. Your brain is still telling the story of why you should act. The second sleep cycle, roughly 48 hours in, is where the first cracks of genuine rational thought begin to appear. You start to see the obvious questions you missed in the heat of the moment. But the full picture is still incomplete. It is not until the third sleep cycle, not until the 72-hour mark, that the human prefrontal cortex has had sufficient time to fully process the decision from multiple angles, to consider the second and third order consequences, to ask the question that Charlie always insisted upon: and then what? If I make this decision, and then what happens, and what happens after that? This is why I have always kept a very specific ritual for any major financial or business decision in my life. I call it the letter in the drawer. The moment I am presented with any major decision, any significant commitment of capital or time or partnership, I sit down that same evening and I write a letter. And that letter, I write down everything I know about the opportunity, the numbers, the people involved, the market dynamics, the risk factors. And then at the bottom of the letter, I write down the very first thing my gut told me about it. That gut reaction is important data. It is not to be trusted alone, but it is not to be ignored either. Then I fold the letter, I place it in a drawer, and I do not look at it for 72 hours. I do not research the opportunity further. I do not discuss it with anyone. I simply allow my mind to work on it beneath the surface, the way a river works on a stone, slowly, invisibly, but with enormous cumulative force. The history of the stock market is, in many ways, a history of decisions made too quickly. Think about the panic of October 1987, when the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell over 22% in a single day, the largest single-day crash in the history of American markets. Millions of investors made catastrophic decisions in those hours. They sold everything. They saw the red numbers, they felt the terror, and they acted with the speed of pure animal instinct. And what happened to every single one of them? They crystallized their losses at the absolute bottom of the market. Within 2 years, the market had fully recovered. Every person who sold on that Black Monday in 1987, if they had simply waited 72 hours, would have been financially unharmed. But the speed of their fear cost them years of compounded returns. I made no trades that day. I did not sell a single share, not because I was unafraid. I was human. I felt the discomfort, but I had a rule, and the rule said 72 hours. So I waited, and the market rewarded my patience with everything it had stolen from the people who could not wait. The same story repeated in 2008. The same story repeats every single time human fear overwhelms human reason. And the beautiful, almost poetic truth of it all is this: every crash, every moment of mass panic is not just a disaster for the impatient. It is a wealth transfer mechanism for the patient. The 72-hour rule does not just protect you from disasters. It also positions you to benefit from the disasters of others. Because while the world is panicking and selling, you are simply sitting quietly with your letter in its drawer, waiting for your rational mind to confirm what your experience has already whispered to you, that this too shall pass, that the fundamentals have not changed, that the right decision, as it almost always is to do nothing at all. Now, I want to talk about the 3 specific enemies that the 72-hour rule is designed to defeat, because understanding your enemy is the first step to defeating it. And these 3 enemies are not abstract. They are not theoretical. They are present in your life right now, operating on your mind at this very moment. And if you do not learn to recognize them, they will continue to cost you money for the rest of your life. The first enemy is FOMO, the fear of missing out. This is the most powerful and most widely deployed psychological weapon in the modern financial arsenal. Every day, on every platform you use, algorithms are working with extraordinary precision to show you evidence that other people are getting rich while you sit still. They show you the person who bought Bitcoin when it was $200. They show you the friend who invested in a startup that went public. They show you the real estate investor who doubled their money in 18 months. And they carefully, deliberately, systematically avoid showing you the thousands of people who lost everything chasing those same trends a little too late. FOMO is not an accident. It is a manufactured psychological condition. It is produced at industrial scale by financial media, by social media platforms, and by investment platforms that profit from your transactions. Every single time you feel that specific ache of seeing someone else get rich from something you didn't do, you are experiencing a carefully engineered emotional trigger designed to override your judgment and make you act. The 72-hour rule is the antidote to FOMO, because FOMO is a creature that lives only in the hot state. After 72 hours, when the emotional temperature has dropped, you will almost always find that the opportunity you were afraid of missing was not what it appeared to be in the heat of the moment. The second enemy is social proof. And this one is far more insidious because it does not feel dangerous. In fact, it feels like wisdom. Social proof is the ancient human tendency to look at what the crowd is doing and assume that the crowd must know something you don't. When everyone around you is buying a particular asset, the human brain interprets the crowd's behavior as evidence of value. When your neighbor buys a rental property and your colleague at work starts talking about cryptocurrency and your brother-in-law is raving about a particular stock, your brain begins to conclude that surely all of these intelligent people cannot be wrong. But they can be. They almost always are, because they all made the same mistake. They were each responding to their own version of social proof. They were each watching someone else do it and concluding that the crowd's behavior was evidence of wisdom rather than evidence of a mania. Every speculative bubble in financial history has been powered by social proof. The South Sea bubble, the tulip mania, the dot-com era, the housing crisis of 2008. In every single case, ordinary people of perfectly normal intelligence watched their neighbors getting rich, concluded that the crowd must know something, and bought in at the exact moment when the last fool was needed to complete the cycle. The 72-hour rule forces you to make your decision in isolation, away from the noise of the crowd, away from the dinner table conversation and the social media feed. It forces you to ask in the quiet of your own mind, not what everyone else thinks, but what the fundamentals actually say. And the third enemy is the salesman's clock. This is perhaps the most ancient weapon of all, and the most obvious once you know to look for it. The salesman's clock is any artificial deadline designed to compress your decision-making time below the point at which rational thought becomes possible. You have seen it everywhere. This offer expires at midnight tonight. Only 3 units left at this price. This is a one-time opportunity and it closes on Friday. These phrases in every context, in every culture are saying the same thing. Do not think. Do not wait. Do not apply the 72-hour rule. Act now before your rational mind has the chance to save you. And I want to give you a rule within the rule that has never failed me in over 70 years of financial life. If someone is telling you that you must decide right now, the answer is no, not maybe, not let me sleep on it. Because any legitimate opportunity, any genuinely valuable business relationship, any investment that is actually as good as it appears will still be available 72 hours from now. The ones that disappear when you ask for time are not opportunities. They are traps. They were never designed to make you wealthy. They were designed to make someone else wealthy at your expense in a very brief window of time before your rational mind could intervene. I learned this the hard way early in my career, and I have never forgotten the lesson. But I have watched thousands of brilliant people far more educated than I am, fall for the salesman's clock over and over again because they believed that the urgency was real. And in the financial world, urgency is almost never real. It is manufactured. It is a tool. And when you recognize it for what it is, it loses every bit of its power over you. Napoleon Hill once wrote a sentence that I have thought about many times over the decades. He said, think twice before you speak, and think 3 times before you act. 3 times. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. This is not the counsel of a coward. This is the counsel of someone who understood at a profound level that the quality of your life is determined not by the number of decisions you make, but by the quality of each individual decision. One extraordinary decision made slowly, deliberately, and with full rational clarity is worth more than 1,000 fast ones, no matter how confident those fast decisions feel in the moment. Now, I want to give you the exact process, the precise, practical 3-step system that I have used for decades to apply the 72-hour rule to every significant decision in my financial life. Because knowing that speed is dangerous is not enough. Understanding that FOMO is a manufactured weapon is not enough. You need a framework, a ritual, a sequence of deliberate actions that you can follow consistently every single time, regardless of how much urgency the world tries to inject into the situation. Step 1 is what I call the cold page. The moment you are presented with any significant decision, the same day, that evening, you sit down in a quiet room with a piece of paper and a pen. Not a laptop, not your phone. A pen and paper, because the physical act of writing engages a different part of the brain than typing. You write down everything relevant about the decision. Every number, every person involved, every risk factor you can identify, and every potential upside. You write it all down as completely and objectively as you can. And then, at the very bottom of the page, you write down in one sentence what your gut instinct told you the moment you heard about the opportunity before you had time to rationalize it in any direction. That gut reaction is data. It is your unconscious mind, which has been pattern matching and processing information about the world your entire life, sending you a signal that your conscious mind has not yet fully processed. It deserves to be recorded honestly, because in 72 hours, you will want to compare it to what your rational mind concludes. Then you fold the paper, you put it away, and you stop thinking about the decision entirely. You do not research it further. You do not discuss it with your spouse or your colleague or your financial advisor. You let it sit. Step 2 is what I call the double sleep. You must sleep on the decision twice before you allow yourself to revisit it. This is non-negotiable. One sleep cycle is not sufficient. I have already explained the neuroscience of this, but I want to emphasize the practical importance of the second sleep cycle, because it is the one that most people are not willing to give it. After one night, the most obvious objections to the decision begin to surface. But after the second night, something different happens. Your mind begins to see the invisible structure of the situation. It begins to notice what is not being said, what is not being shown, what question has not been asked that should be asked. Charlie Munger used to call this the inversion of the inversion. The first night you invert the decision, asking what could go wrong. The second night, you invert the inversion, asking what is being hidden from you by the framing of the opportunity itself. This second layer of thinking is where the most important insights live. It is where you discover that the confident businessman who approached you has never actually built a profitable business. It is where you notice that the investment prospectus never mentions the exit strategy. It is where you ask the question that dissolves the entire illusion. And then what? If I make this investment and it works perfectly, and then what? Where does my money go? Who controls it? What happens if the market turns? These questions seem obvious in retrospect, but they are almost invisible in the hot state. The second sleep cycle is what makes them visible. Step 3 is what I call reading as a stranger. Exactly 72 hours after you receive the proposal, you retrieve your cold page from the drawer, and you read it as if someone else wrote it. You read it not as the excited or fearful or tempted person who wrote it 3 days ago, but as a dispassionate outside analyst who has no emotional attachment to the outcome. Ask yourself 3 specific questions as you read. First, would I be comfortable if Charlie Munger could see exactly what I am about to do and why? If the answer is no, or even if there is any hesitation before the yes, you have your answer. Second, am I acting on evidence or am I acting on hope? Evidence is a 10-year track record of audited financial statements. Evidence is a founder who has built and sold a profitable business before. Hope is a compelling pitch and a confident smile. And third, am I the one choosing this? Or has someone created conditions in which this choice feels inevitable? That third question is the most important of all because the entire machinery of the modern sales and financial industry is designed to make you feel as if you are making a free, rational choice while you are, in fact, being guided down a carefully constructed path toward a predetermined destination. If you can answer all 3 questions honestly, if you can read your cold page with the dispassionate eyes of a stranger and still feel genuine conviction in the decision, then proceed. But if any hesitation surfaces, if any doubt whispers at the edges of your certainty, then wait another 72 hours. The opportunity that is truly right for you will survive another 3 days. The ones that evaporate when you introduce patience are the ones that were designed to exploit your impatience. I want to be very specific about where this rule applies because I do not want you to misunderstand its scope. The 72-hour rule is for major decisions. It is for investments of significant capital. It is for business partnerships and employment changes and real estate transactions and any commitment that will materially alter the trajectory of your financial life. It is not for ordering lunch or choosing a streaming service. The ordinary daily decisions of life should be made with ordinary speed. But for the decisions that matter, for the ones that can add or subtract years of compounding from your financial future, the 72-hour rule is not optional. It is the most important financial protection available to any person who does not have an army of analysts and advisors around them. And I will tell you something that most wealthy people will never admit publicly. Even with all of my resources, even with access to the best financial minds in the world, I still use the cold page and the double sleep for every significant decision I consider, not because I doubt my judgment, but because I have learned through decades of experience that judgment divorced from patience is not judgment at all. It is impulse wearing a very expensive suit. I want to leave you with the mathematics of this because I think the numbers will anchor the principle in your mind more powerfully than any story I could tell. Consider the financial life of an ordinary person, someone earning a reasonable income, investing consistently over the course of 40 years. Now, within that 40-year window, assume that this person makes one catastrophic financial decision every 3 years. This is not unusual. Most people make far more than that, but let us say one every 3 years. A bad investment here, a panicked sale during a crash there, a business partnership that unraveled, a piece of real estate purchased at the peak of a bubble. Each of these decisions, on average, sets them back by a meaningful amount. Now run the counterfactual. What if, for each of those catastrophic decisions, the person had applied the 72-hour rule? What if, instead of signing in the heat of the moment, they had written their cold page, slept twice, and read it as a stranger? Research on decision-making suggests that this simple process eliminates the vast majority of catastrophically bad decisions because most catastrophically bad decisions are obvious in retrospect. And the 72-hour rule is simply a mechanism for bringing retrospect forward into the present. The difference in cumulative wealth over 40 years between a person who makes systematic impulsive decisions and a person who applies the 72-hour rule consistently is not marginal. It is transformational. We are not talking about 10 or 20% better outcomes. We are talking about multiples. We are talking about the difference between retiring with financial dignity and retiring with financial fear. And this brings me to the deepest truth I have learned in over 7 decades of financial life. Wealth is not primarily built by the decisions you make. Wealth is built by the decisions you choose not to make. The history of Berkshire Hathaway is not primarily a story of brilliant acquisitions. It is primarily a story of disciplined restraint. For every company we bought, there were 100 we looked at carefully and walked away from. For every investment we made, there were thousands we evaluated and declined. The quality of what we built was determined as much by what we said no to as by what we said yes to. And the 72-hour rule was the mechanism that made those no's possible. Because saying no to something that feels urgent and exciting and profitable in the moment requires a very specific kind of strength. It requires the ability to tolerate the discomfort of uncertainty for 72 hours. To resist the voice that says, act now, to trust that the right decision will survive the wait. Most people cannot do this. Most people have had their capacity for patience systematically eroded by a world that profits from their impulsiveness. And that erosion is the most expensive thing that has ever happened to the financial lives of ordinary people. But you now know the antidote. The cold page, the double sleep, reading as a stranger 72 hours between the moment of temptation and the moment of commitment. This is not a limitation. This is your greatest competitive advantage in a world of impatient people. Because in a world where everyone else is moving at the speed of a smartphone notification, the person who moves at the speed of genuine thought will consistently, inevitably, mathematical certainty, outperform. I am going to leave you with one final thought. The greatest investment you will ever make is not in a stock or a piece of real estate or a business. The greatest investment you will ever make is in the quality of your own decisions. Every dollar you preserve from a catastrophic mistake is a dollar that compounds for the rest of your financial life. Every decision you make with genuine clarity rather than manufactured urgency is a brick in the foundation of something that will outlast you. Stop checking the price every 5 minutes. Stop responding to urgency that someone else created. Stop believing that the right decision has to be made right now. Give yourself 72 hours. Write the letter. Sleep twice. Read it as a stranger. And watch how the world begins to look completely different from the other side of patience. The clock does not start when the salesman gives you his deadline. The clock starts when you close the drawer and begin to think.